back, everybody. And in the series of interviews, today's episode, we have Susan joining us. So Susan is somebody who is dealing with hoarding and cluttering issues herself. And Susan is joining us on the audio today to talk about the topic of shame. So welcome, Susan.
Hi, Chia-Ying. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, so before we begin, I think I wanted to thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us on YouTube today about this topic of shame, because it's such a vulnerable thing to share yourself on this public place about a specific issue. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I really appreciate what you're doing to acquire and share information about this condition, because even researchers don't know a whole lot about it. So the public understanding of it is even less. And I really appreciate having an opportunity to share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, so I know that the word hoarding can be quite loaded for a lot of people because there's so much stigma around this issue, and the whole point of this stigmatizing has a lot of the long journey, and we are still in the very beginning of this journey. So would you like to share with how do you feel about this word hoarding, and is there any kind of in the beginning you feel this way and later you feel differently, something like that? Anything you can talk about this word hoarding and what it means to you?
Sure. Before I answer that question, because you brought up the word stigma,
right.
It's a huge issue, and it's a factor of why I'm here on audio only, because I'm not hesitant to share my experience with this. However, my work is of a public nature, and unfortunately with the stigma, if I think a lot of people with this condition share this. You're afraid that if your identity is known and people who know you find out this is what you're struggling with, it could be held against you, or if they have a misconception of what someone with this condition is like, it could affect my livelihood or my work. So, I would hope to be able at some point to just speak freely, but I think this is a shared concern with many people. They don't even want to post online with their name because they're so afraid to be found out. So that being said, the term hoarder, I really, really dislike.
Yeah.
It's such a label, and now the word hoarding, like hoarding issues, or someone has a hoard, I don't have such an issue with. But when you label someone as a hoarder, even the sound of it to my ears is uncomfortable. And you don't call someone who has cancer, you don't call them a cancer, it's, the stigma and the labeling is difficult. So I prefer to refer to it as, I call it disposophobia. I didn't coin that term, I read it in a book, but my main struggle is with actually discarding things. There's so much stuff in my home I actually don't want. Right. But when I try to let it go, concerns about, how's the best way to get rid of it? If someone else could still use this, can I donate it? And then which organization is the best to donate it to,
Right.
Or how to best recycle it, or can I repurpose it? So disposophobia is a term I prefer. Some people like clutterholic. So now in the beginning, I did use the term hoarder because that's unfortunately what is most prevalent in public discussion, I think. And when people go online to try to search out information about it, they will use that term. So I tend to limit my use of it when it comes to maybe the keyword in a search for someone to look up. I don't want to promote that term, but I know when they're going to look for information. Like I have a YouTube channel where I share my recovery journey, and I would like for people who have the struggle to find it.
Right.
So I use it in there. But I did, I think my channel in the beginning was called I Am a Compulsive Hoarder or something like that, that just very kind of laid out point blank so people could find it, but I changed it eventually to I can let go. Which is much more palatable to me and more about what the journey is. So yeah.
Right. I love that change, because in the beginning it's like it's almost like the public has a perception, and for people who struggle with this issue kind of like take in
Yes.
perception,
Yes.
and internalize the shaming inside us, and then
Absolutely.
we label ourselves.
Yeah, it's almost like that public image of it is what we define ourselves by. And it's taken me years of a lot of work and introspection to start realizing like I define myself, you know, and unfortunately, like due to things like trauma, I don't have a good sense of self starting out. So that's a large part of the recovery. You know, people think it's about the stuff. It's not about the stuff.
Yeah.
It's about your sense of self and self-worth. And it reminds me of something, this might have been even before we ever connected. I watched one of your talks online, and you made a comment that just struck me to my core. You said, if you care about yourself, if you love yourself, would you want yourself giving your space to possessions rather than to yourself? And it made me cry, and I shared it with a support group, and they all said, what was that again? Because they hadn't thought about it in that sense. Oh, it's just the stuff, and I need to clear this out. I need to set goals and declutter. You keep hearing that term, declutter, declutter, declutter. You know, and the focus is actually inside.
Right. The focus is actually inside, and like I cannot stress that, and I cannot agree with you on that more. Really.
It's hard to accept though, because people want the stuff out.
Right.
And the journey to go inside is longer, and probably harder in many ways. But I believe for long-term change, it is where we have to go.
Right. Yeah. Because this external situation, the physical clutter didn't just come from only outside, it comes from inside.
Exactly. And I think someone said this phrase I heard recently, that every behavior is trying to meet a need. Right? So we shame ourselves for our behavior. Why do I hang on to this? Why? Well, it's trying to meet some kind of need. So the question is, what is the need you're trying to meet?
Exactly.
Otherwise, you can declutter all you want till the sun, goes down. It's gonna come back because that need hasn't been met.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it really sounds like you have been on this journey for a long time, and there's so much like insight and self-understanding and self-healing has evolved throughout your journey.
Very much so, but I'll tell you, it takes a long time to get to that point, to just have the awareness.
Right.
And then to change it is a whole nother journey, but this is another metaphor I heard that has really stuck with me. They said, if you only focus on the symptoms and not the cause, right? That's like trying to hang new curtains in a house when the house is on fire.
Exactly. Yeah. And speaking of the journey, especially in the beginning about gaining the awareness, I wonder if shame ever been a barrier of you seeing the issue for yourself, or being a barrier of you reaching out for help?
Shame is a barrier for many things. Yeah, for sure, reaching out for help, because it involves kind of exposing, right, our authentic self, that what we're struggling with.
Right.
And it's human nature to want to be accepted. And especially when this public perception of the condition is so judged and stigmatized.
Right.
It takes a lot to come forward with that and tell somebody. And I don't remember why I first told my neighbors. We were neighbors for a very long time. I adored them. They were very kind to me. Two beautiful girls who love cats. I have cats. I could never have them over to invite them, to play with the cats. And they would invite me over for barbecues or parties. And this I find very heartbreaking for people with this condition. And it's not only me, I shared this at a conference. You won't pursue friendships, not because you don't like the people, you like them so much, but the fear is that eventually down the line, I'm going to have to invite them over, or they're going to think something strange, or I can't reciprocate. And so you avoid it, and then you lose that potential friendship because of the shame, So even not even asking for help, just having connection with other people, which is so essential to our well-being. And when I finally came out and told them, it was like a dam bursting. I cried so hard, and I cry now thinking about it. And just physically, I could feel just this huge, just gushing, within me. And it's necessary though. It's scary as hell, but it's necessary. And what makes it even more scary is that you have no idea how the person is going to react. And you can think all you want, like, oh, I think this person will be more compassionate than this person. You still don't know. That's the harsh reality, is that some people that I opened up to didn't take it the way I thought that they would. And and it's not judging them. Maybe it just wasn't within their ability to digest that. And they kind of faded away. Then there are other people that I told that I was shocked at how well they took it and how much, compassion they extended to me. So it is a roll of the dice, but it's a necessary thing to do, I feel, as part of the healing, because in isolation, this condition gets worse. Shame loves secrecy. If anyone's read Brene Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection, it thrives on secrecy. And I actually made the most amazing friend during this pandemic. And what was key is, I hadn't even known her that long before I decided to confide in her, but I was really paying attention to how she spoke, the words that she chose, how she, spoke about life, and how she behaved with other people. And I had been putting off, because I don't want to acquire anything more. I was reluctant to purchase an item that would be useful for interviews for work now that everything was online. And she picked up on that, because I was like, I kept wanting to, it was basically lights, right? Lights for video filming. And I kept saying, well, I need to record during daytime using natural light. And one day she just asked me, she said, may I ask you why you're reluctant to purchase lights? And that was my sign, because she didn't say, why don't you just order some lights from Amazon? What's the big deal? They're not that much, blah, blah, blah. And I felt safe to confide in her, so I told her. And her response was, I'm honored that you shared that with me. And she said, would it help if somebody just sat with you? Didn't do anything, just sat with you while you sorted through things. And the fact that she didn't say, oh, I'll help you throw things out, I'll come over with big garbage bags, that scares us, because that's the challenge. And I told her at that stage I wasn't ready to have her inside yet. But when I went home that evening, the next morning, I mopped my floor, something I'd been putting off for weeks. She really helped me without even stepping foot in my home. Just to know somebody cares about you and doesn't judge you for this, and wants to try to help, but not tell you how you should handle this. To be there is very key, because and I know people mean, well, how do I help them? I want to go and clean, and they don't understand why that can actually backfire. And then they start assuming, oh, they don't really want help. They say they want help, but they don't really want help. It's hard to describe how handcuffed you can feel by this condition, even though you want to change. It's a very strong grip that it has on you. And then, I literally will say, I don't want this item anymore. When I go to try to throw it in the trash, I feel like I can't let it go. And then you shame yourself. There's shame again. What's wrong with me? I know I don't want this. Why am I living like this? And it's self-shame, it's self-hatred. There's shame all around. Right.
What you described in terms of what your friend offered, I think that just demonstrates the power, the healing power of acceptance. healing power of acceptance, and genuine acceptance, like, oh, okay, you have these difficulties. Oh, and the curiosity to ask how can I help you? Would you like me to just sit with you?
Yeah.
And there's no agenda.
Exactly, no agenda, and no exactly, not telling you how you should do it, and actually like curiosity, like, oh, what does that feel like? Like I'll explain things to her now, and she goes, oh, I didn't realize that that's what you're, experiencing, because people just see the outside part. Okay, so and here's when you say about acceptance, it's not just acceptance from others. Even more important is self-acceptance.
Exactly.
So, because when we judge ourselves, we don't hate ourselves into better behavior. We think, oh, I just got to get tougher with myself. Come on, double down. And this happens all the time. Okay, every day I'm going to throw out 5 things, right? And then you fall off the wagon. Oh, I have to make it up now. I got to throw out 10, 15 today because you're ashamed about missing out one day. Now I got to really make it up. And I did this for years. And it's taken me years to realize, yeah, I didn't do it there. Maybe today I just do 1.
Right. And that's what I was gonna ask you as the next question about you shared a little bit about how shame gets in the way of connecting with other people. And but this is also, now you're talking about how shame gets in the way of you connecting with yourself, the part of you that needs your help.
Yes.
So instead of helping the part of you that has difficulties letting things go, a lot of times when we shame ourselves, we punish ourselves, we are setting a wall against that part of us that really needs help.
Yeah. This condition is very much an internal battle, very much so.
Right.
Yeah. And also I learned during this pandemic shelter at home time, I took the opportunity to learn as much as I could about trauma, especially like developmental trauma.
Right.
And so, before I obviously realized shame is something I felt as a result of hoarding behavior and clutter issues, right? Like I'm living like this, I feel like something's wrong with me. But I learned through studying trauma and everything that developmental trauma creates a feeling of shame in a young child, like something's wrong with me. And it's actually the driver of much of my clutter and hoarding behavior, because I feel like I don't deserve to take up space on this planet. Okay, so that's why everything else gets a priority over me.
Right.
Oh, that cardboard box could be reused again before going to a landfill. I need to save it, right? Everyone else says, oh, you can just buy the box when you need it. But when you don't value yourself enough, then the well-being of that box or that bag or those things become a higher priority than your own well-being, and you don't even realize you're doing it.
Right. Yeah, and that's why a lot of times when people are struggling with issues, with this issues of letting things go, they look at things and they see all the good qualities of things. Oh, that's a nice dress. Oh, that's a special color here in that card, but they don't see how these things serve me. How all these are good things, and how is it helpful for me, and as opposed to seeing how the things are helpful for themselves, they see how they can be of service to the stuff.
I would take it even a level further and say, not only do they not consider how that item is actually helpful to them, I don't see how that item is actually hurting me. Right? That's out of the equation.
Right on. Yes.
Where is that in the equation? Like if I think about it, all this misery, this pain, this feeling of, because this condition, it doesn't let you rest. Even when I sleep, dreaming about it, nightmares about people coming into my home. I mean, you wake up, you don't feel rested. It's with you all the time. And so when I've asked friends that I've confided in to please not give me anything, right? And they still, unfortunately, our society still feels like gift giving is a sign of care. They will give me something thinking, oh, but it's because I like you, I care about you. I try to explain like this. Imagine like if I'm always carrying a stack of heavy books, like 50 heavy books, all the time, even when I sleep, all the time. you giving me that gift, as well intentioned as it is like another book on the stack that I can't put down. I'm trying to wheel down the stack so that I can move more freely through my life. And so I really ask that you not give me anything. The best thing you can do is give me a phone call, spend time with me, go to lunch, and I know now everybody texts and not, doing those kind of things, but a phone call really goes a long way. I don't think people realize how much that can help a person that's dealing with this, because the isolation is really painful, and this lack of connection.
Yeah. And that comes back to heal the self, the injured self inside. Materials don't heal.
They don't. Right.
It's love.
Exactly.
And connection.
Yes, and you feel like if somebody's willing to take the time to call me, maybe there is something worthwhile about me. I hate to, it boils down to that, right? Because if I feel there's nothing worthwhile about me, then that cardboard box is very important and more important than me, because I have no sense of value of myself, that, hey, I deserve to put more of that attention on myself than those things.
Right. And the next question I have for you is that over the years, do you see, have you noticed what kind of things and circumstances kind of increases the shame? And what kind of circumstances, such as what you were just talking about, the friendship and somebody cares about you, kind of like decreases the shame or helps to heal the shame?
Yes. Okay. Well, we live in a time now, especially it's consumerism, and they show everything on social media. Look at their really organized pantry and all this stuff, and then we start comparing.
Right.
Oh, I don't have that. I'm so far from that, and and realizing that it's just something kind of created by society. In many ways. So that's not a measurement stick. They're doing that to sell organizing, items or things like that. And it's hard to just say, I'm just me and I have my struggles. And, it's, someone wrote this comment on my YouTube channel. It really made me cry. She said, I think I finally realized that there's nothing wrong with me. I just have something I need to work on. Right? Because we just think there's something wrong with us. So maybe my house doesn't look like that. That doesn't make me a horrible human being. Right? So I think comparison can really augment shame at times.
Right.
And again, the kind of beating ourselves up, saying I'm not progressing fast enough, or that also increases shame. We do it to ourselves. Connection with others really helps to reduce feeling of shame, like compassionate others who are, understanding and non-judgmental. Also, again, learning about the effects of trauma really helped me, because I started realizing that I didn't choose this. Okay, so the phrase I heard was, there's nothing wrong with you, something wrong happened to you.
Exactly.
Right? So it's not my fault. And being able to say it's not my fault, I didn't cause this. Yes. Really helps to release a lot of that shame. And I don't mean, when I say it's not my fault, I don't mean that as a get out of jail free card. I don't have to do anything about this. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility now. What do I do with that information? And it's not an easy journey, but what's the alternative? So what can I do to improve the situation now that I know I didn't cause it? Right.
Yeah, that reminds me of how a lot of times in the compassion focused therapy, one of the beginning and important things that we introduce to our clients is this very idea of it's things that have happened to you, including your genes, including your earlier environments that you did not have a say about, and it will just happen to you, and those things all shaped you, and therefore it's not your fault. And there's like very polarizing responses whenever I introduce this idea. Some people just like what you just shared, they really feel like, oh yeah, it's not my fault. And other people feel almost like I have to hold on to this being my fault. Like otherwise I will become complacent, otherwise I will become bad, or even worse, it has to be my fault. Yeah, so I wonder if you can say more about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that with me, the difference in responses, because one thing that might help with the part of people feeling like they have to hang on to that feeling of it's my fault. And this involves, like, I've done a lot of like inner child work, that kind of thing. And we forget this, that these are adaptive behaviors that we figured out as very young children in order to survive the circumstances we were in. Because as young children, we can't move out. We can't trade our parents for ones that are more attentive to our emotions and our needs, okay, whatever the trauma was. So we figured out, how do I adapt my behavior to survive? Okay, maybe if I'm a better child, if I'm more perfect, if I better behaved, if I'm more quiet, then my parents will show me love.
Right.
Okay, so if I can thank that part for figuring that out to let me survive, that's huge. I'm here. Okay, now the issue is I'm an adult now. I've done many more things. I have more agency now. I've learned things since then. I can, change circumstances that I couldn't change as a child. But if I'm stuck in my child consciousness, it feels like I'm still helpless. So basically acknowledging that this was an adaptive behavior that was life-saving when I was younger, okay, just doesn't serve its purpose now, is helpful. So, but being able to be aware in the moment that, oh, that feeling I have of dread, that's kind of like a flashback to when I was younger and helpless. But if I'm really present right now, am I okay? Am I safe? Is there something I can do to feel better? And then that's really been helpful to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think what you mentioned about thinking that kind of like child version of you, that's so key. Because a lot of people now, they say, well, I know better. I am 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. I should know better, but I'm still doing all these things. But that's coming from a very historical pattern. And when we are still so young, all the patterns that we learn are so ingrained.
Yes, and we've repeated it, right, unconsciously, over and over. That groove is very, very deep.
Right.
It feels like instinct. That's how I described it. And when I first spoke to one researcher, I go, all I can tell you is it feels like instinct.
Right. Yeah. Feels like instinct. And also, it's not just any kind of light instinct. It's instinct for survival.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very strong.
It's so strong. And one thing that really helped me with the self-compassion is because I wonder if you find this in your practice, that when you ask people to, express some self-compassion towards themselves, they find it very hard or even distasteful. The inner child work was so key, because I found old photos of myself as a child. And if I heard you said, some people say, oh, I should know better. If I look at the picture of a 3-year-old child and say, you should know better, no, not at all. And I think it was Janina Fisher said that it doesn't matter if you are expressing self-compassion to a young part of yourself or your adult self. It's the feeling of that compassion that is key. So for me, starting with these photos of my young parts was so helpful. I made a photo collage. I put it at the table and I have my meals with them. And it sounds woo-woo and, out there, but if I have a conversation, the child says, thank you for making me pancakes, because she didn't feel that when she was younger. And then I'm so happy to make them for you. It like creates that inner relationship that was lacking in childhood.
Right. Yeah. In this way, you're really going back to the source of the issue.
Yes.
And really healing the inner child that didn't get all the needs met. Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed, like, if you realize, like, for myself, when someone does something nice for me and I start crying, or someone tells me, oh, you're an outstanding person, and I start crying, that's a sign that something was missing, that wasn't met, right? And so if I have that hard of a time accepting a kind gesture from someone else, obviously I don't do it to myself, right? Those kind gestures. So the other day I went to the farmer's market and they have fresh fish.
Mm-hmm.
Now the whole fish is $7 a pound that you have to clean and everything. The fillet is $17 a pound. Okay. Now normally I'll buy the whole fish. I'll gut it, I'll fillet it. Okay. That day I paused though, because I had a busy afternoon coming up. And I said to the vendor, I said, I think I'm going to cut myself a break today. And please give me the fillets, right? I'm worth the fillets. I'm worth $17. And it was so nice because I did have a very busy, kind of emotionally draining day. And I was able to just put the fillet steam right away. And then while I'm eating it, it's very important to make a note of positive experience, because our brains are I think Rick Hansen described it as your brain is Velcro for negative things and Teflon for positive things. And that's a survival mechanism, because it's more important to notice threats in your environment for safe, to survive. So when something good happens, I need to pause and say, okay, remember this feeling right now.
Right.
And I said, wow, it's so nice. I can just easily cook this fillet. It tastes so good. I don't have to pick any bones out.
Yeah.
And then it's like wanting to treat myself better in the future is more reinforced, when I note that feeling.
Right. Yeah, that's such a beautiful story, and I imagine that in the maybe if we have interviewed you a couple of years ago, it's kind of maybe we'll meet you at a place where you're still doing this kindness exposure to yourself, because for, like you said, for a lot of people who aren't or who haven't been used to be treated in a nice way, if somebody treats you nicely, it's like, ooh, what is this?
Yeah.
Coming from yourself, it's like, ooh, what is this?
Well, you don't even try it. That's the thing. If someone else offers it, you don't have control over that, and you can have a response of crying. But if you're so hard on yourself, you won't even extend that kindness to yourself to have that response. That's, does that make sense?
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It takes effort to say, I'm going to try this kind gesture to myself. That takes conscious effort.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking us through this journey with you. It feels like we started off by talking about shame, and then we go from the shame from the outside, and shame, how does shame affect us in terms of relationship with the outside world. And then we realize, hey, the shame is not coming just from having the hoarding or cluttering issue itself. Shame actually stems from much earlier on, even before the hoarding and cluttering issues begin. Yeah, and so then we also talked about how shame is preventing ourselves from connecting with that vulnerable part of ourselves that actually is the part that needs healing.
Exactly. Basically, I abandoned myself early on. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my needs are. I read one book about developmental trauma, and he described one client, her statement was, I'm a master at getting by with a minimum. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. Why use one paper towel when I can use half a paper towel, right? I'm not worth that convenience. I can get by with less, because I'm not attuned to my needs. I'm very attuned to other people's needs, people pleasing, right? And I think that's a survival mechanism from early on about, okay, for some reason, whatever the circumstances, if your caregivers, maybe they had to work long hours, right? And they couldn't be there to spend time with the kids. It's not always malicious. People hear trauma and think like someone abused you. It can just be emotional neglect or whatever, the separation from the caregivers. But the child cannot view themselves as a good person in a bad situation. Their brain is not that developed, right? They think if something feels wrong in the situation, it must be me.
Yeah. Must be
right?
my fault.
My fault, right? Because what's worse, to imagine that you have, you're a lovable child, but your parents are not capable of loving you, or your parents are capable of loving you, but you're just not lovable yet. You have to be a better child, right? In the former situation, you have no option because the parents are not capable of loving you. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, it's hopeless.
Right. If I believe my parents are able to love me, but I just need to do better, that's what I can change. I can try to be better.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say that when you say that I have abandoned myself, and I wanted to use what you give to the people who give to the people who may have a hard time accepting it's not their fault. You said when you look at the 3-year-old you in the picture, you wouldn't say, hey, you 3-year-old me, you abandoned yourself. No, she's just never been taught how to connect with herself.
Right.
Yeah, she just never had the safeness to connect with herself and to know that's a thing.
Exactly, to know what that even feels like, because we gain that from our caregivers, right? To be attuned and say, oh, when I smile, they smile.
Right.
When I hurt, they want to know why I hurt. They don't tell me be quiet, kind of thing, because then you just think something's wrong with me.
Right.
I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't feel sensitive. I shouldn't feel hurt.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, thank you very much.
I appreciate the time. Yeah.
No problem. Yes, and thank you so much for your time and for everything that you've shared.
I appreciate your work, and I look forward to everything that you're going to be sharing on your channel about this.
Thank you so much, and maybe in the future we'll have another opportunity to connect and speak again and share.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.